Into the Nexus is a production of amove.tv. Bookmark Amove TV for other great video games and esports podcasts. Into the Nexus is sponsored by listeners like you via patreon.com/ITN. Welcome back, everybody. This is Into the Nexus, the podcast all about Heroes of the Storm. I'm Garrett Weinzierl. Sitting with me, as always, is Kyle Fergusson. And joining us for his monthly return to this here podcast is none other than DunkTrain. Welcome back, Dunk.
Hey, man. Good to be back.
Good to have you back. And it's a good time to have you back because Kyle, you and I, we were sitting around the proverbial Heroes of the Storm campfire today. Or maybe a water cooler because it's like the daytime. We can pretend it's work. That's a better analogy. I'll use that. And we both realized that we're kind of at that point again, which it seems like we get to every month, where Dunk's just about to go up, come on the show, and we're here to just throw our arms up and go, what the heck is happening in our pickup games?
Yes, very much so. I was extremely excited about Garrosh. I expected him to have some sort of decent impact in the win rates, and lo and behold, I feel like I am feeling the force, and I can just hear all the Garroshes making very lonely engages with no DPS to follow. And it makes me sad.
You're Obi-Wan on the Falcon when Alderaan explodes? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like, I had to sit down, and I'm just seeing that 42%. I'm just like, oh, my heart. Like, and Muradin, too. Like, I know you jump in there, and you're going to last 30 seconds, but nothing's happening. And Garrosh, you're not going to last that 30 seconds in the first place. You might throw someone cool. I'm just so sad.
I'm with you. I'm with you, man. And we're gonna, I feel like we're gonna cannibalize a lot of our Garrosh talk at the top of the show, but screw it. This is the course of the conversation. But I'm in the exact same boat because I 100% believe in the Garrosh. I've been doing very well with him myself. I asked you earlier, Kyle, what your win rate was. I know he's working out very well for you. Dunk, I have not had a chance to talk to you before the show. How's what's Garrosh looking like for you? Playing as him and playing against him?
Garrosh has looked excellent, actually. Like, when I was playing him, I was like, oh man, this guy's pretty strong. Like, he definitely has some weaknesses. And then, like, I just casually checked the win rates, and I'm like, what? 42%? I could not believe how low it was. I mean, I knew it was lower than 50 because he does have some vulnerabilities, but, like, dang, I didn't expect him to be at the bottom.
Yeah, so I mean, like, right out the so now it's funny we're talking about Garrosh, so we'll get back to the overall chat in a bit. But what do you think it is? I mean, when I got onto PTR last week and on the episode last week when we were talking about our first impressions, I came right at the gate and I was like, well, in my very first game as Garrosh, I thought Wrecking Ball was the most poorly designed ability in the history of this game. And then Kyle talked me off a ledge and compared it to a Stitch's hook. It's like, well, you shouldn't be using it when there's a bunch of lane minions around. It's too strong. Where if you could pick out your specific target in the middle of a group and then toss them, it would just be ridiculous. That you need to kind of have that targeting system in place as a skill barrier to the ability. But I'm curious if folks just, a lot of people out there just didn't try it on PTR. Garrosh is now live. They're getting in there and they're just throwing minions like crazy.
Yeah, I think that might have something to do with it. I also think the biggest surprise for people is he was kind of sold as this like infinitely tanky frontliner. And the reality is he's just not that tanky. Even if you look at the math, even if he's taking like continuous damage instead of big chunks, which is generally not the case, he's not much tankier than most tanks. In fact, he's one of the lowest effective hit point pools of all the tanks. Combined with no mobility, means that he's really not that tanky, and it's very easy to feed on him.
Yeah, I think maybe we were seduced by Stitches, right? Great damage, pull effects, maybe even Artanis for a bit there. Still just powerful. And Bloodthirst. People go, Stitches, Bloodthirst, but that's 10% of missing health. And you just lose it all real quick in such a bursty meta.
Yeah. Like, the first time I played against a Tracer, and I died from, like, 35% HP or something from the bomb. I was like, this hero doesn't feel that tanky.
Yeah, no, I think you're I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That people look at the trait, and now we also have this armor indicating UI in the game. So now more than ever, if it wasn't something that you were kind of aware of before the fact, now it's being spelt out for you, especially on Garrosh. Obviously, not being spelt out in other ways. There's the whole conversation later about why isn't spell armor being shown to us. But yeah, I think too many people are overvaluing his trait.
And I've been finding a bit of walk-in potential with double up and using that quite early in a fight to make sure I just don't get exploded, get down to that part where I actually have decent armor, and then I can survive a couple things. But it's pretty chancy. I'm having the most success actually with Garrosh in quick match again. I've been taking him into Hero League with a 4-man backline, possibly because wherever I throw something, the 4-man backline can actually kind of target it instead of having to be pre-positioned or something cute like that.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I didn't think about using double up that way. That's so you're saying popping it early, so
right? Not waiting until it's like down, because if it is doubled and it goes to 75, so if you use it too late, you're not actually getting anything out of it, or the maximum, I guess you could say. But really, it's so tough to walk him in. In fact, one of the things I think we're going to be talking about a lot today is it's really hard to walk anything in if it's under fire. And you're going to be under fire unless you messed up the draft.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. It's really interesting right now. Like, I'm not sure where he fits in the meta. He's got such powerful displacement tools that I can't imagine him not being good. But, like, sometimes he just feels so awkward. Like, you ever try to, like, fight a range carry with them or something, and they're, like, just stutter stepping outside your Q range, and there's nothing. You try to walk backwards, they chase you, you walk at them, they run away. You're like, oh, feels bad.
And there's some weird ones too, like intimidation, which reduces the attack speed of heroes hit by the entire groundbreaker, but I want to pull them too. So I kind of feel stuck in this weird, like, I'm constantly maybe over paying attention to Into the Fray or my Wrecking Ball. It'll take a bit, but I'm just shocked at this win rate. And it's true, we're looking at Valera Rhaegar-sized health here on the guy, but he releases beneath, and to say beneath these characters is madness to me. I am reporting on the lowest win rate heroes here, and it includes Ariel, Zarya, Thrall, Valera, Li Ming, Tychus, Abathur, Cho'Gall, fine, it's Hero League, and Medivh very last. But between that Cho'Gall and that Medivh are a Genji and a Garrosh.
I mean, we're surprised by Garrosh because we got to play him ahead of time. It's a new hero. You kind of expect whatever. But yet, when did Genji get that low? When did that happen? And that's kind of what the conversation you and I were having before the show, Kyle. We were coming in, and you were talking about all the weird things that you've seen in your games, and I was exchanging that with exchanging the weird things I've seen as well. So I'm kind of curious with Dunk here. Does it seem strange to you? I mean, has anything been sticking out to you?
On the Genji topic specifically, you're asking?
I think I was talking more the meta overall.
I don't know. I feel like if you consider that Genji was pretty much permabanned even before the last round of nerfs, and now he's just not seeing very much play in Hero League, the meta hasn't actually shifted very much at all in GM in the last 6 weeks, maybe. The bans have changed a little bit, but it's still kind of like Stitches and Diablo running the games, and they basically decide who wins and who loses, I feel like, or like an Illidan, task combo or something. Genji just doesn't really fit that well in Hero League anymore, thankfully, because of his power level and competitive, because of how good he is in the narrow, focused comps, but people don't draft properly in Hero League to build really focused comps where Genji excels.
Interesting. What do you mean by focused comp?
Like a focused composition would be one where all 5 heroes on the team essentially are working together towards the same goal, the same win condition. I would call the prototypical like maximum amount of focus a composition could be would be in competitive. You saw a lot of Anub'arak, Uther, Genji, Illidan, one backliner. So you have essentially Anub'arak, Illidan, who are both divers. You have Genji, who's a diver. You have Uther, who's the best fast fighting healer, and then you have one random range who can just kind of put pressure damage and maybe follow up on the kills. That's a focused composition. Your goal is literally to one-shot someone during the duration of Cocoon, and you're pretty much always going to be able to do it because you're going to Cocoon someone, hunt someone else, and then Genji, Illidan are going to tear that person apart. In Hero League, you end up with a lot of like, I've got an Anub'arak, and then I've got like a sustain healer like Medic, and then I've got 2 range DPS, and then 1 specialist who's split pushing the whole game. So you have a comp that just is trying to do a whole bunch of different things. It's not focused. It has no plan to win the game.
That is true. That is very true. And I am seesawing wildly between Diamond 3 and Diamond 4 right now. My biggest issue facing there is that the map rotation really causes some issues. And you walk in day 1, Battlefield of Eternity, Gray Mains on defense, and then that makes everything else fall apart because the Sonya gets tilted and then the tank is tilted because, and then just go from there. Or we had this week a Butcher on Blackheart's Bay who took the double soak and did that for 14 minutes. With the changeover, right? And, you know, you go kill heroes, right?
Yeah.
We have an Asmodan. Maybe he can cover the top of it. Right?
I mean, how do you really combat that, though? Like, how do you combat people who just don't read changes? Short of, I don't actually, no, never mind. I just thought of it. When a change makes, do what Hearthstone does and have my screen is taken up when I log in by this hero changed, bullet points. This hero changed, bullet points.
Ooh, that's an interesting idea, actually.
Whenever a card gets changed in Hearthstone, you log in, the first thing you see, and you have to click to get past it, is a full screen thing that takes up your whole damn screen and says, this card has changed.
Would that bother people, though, since changes happen so much faster in a MOBA? Like, heroes get changed way more often in Heroes than cards get changed, for sure.
Well, then maybe don't make it so you have to click once to get past it, or even if I don't know. I think Heroes has a lot more freedom because of the tab layout of their menu UI. I mean, you have all these tabs across the top. You have a landing page.
Like the home page could have something, the landing page.
Right. When HGC is going on, it's an HGC advertisement. Most of the time, it's right now, it's just Garrosh being super awesome. Like, why not?
Now that you mention it, there's no indication in game that there was a patch, right? Like, if your Blizzard client just patches it for you and you don't notice, and you aren't the kind to like check the Reddit and stuff, you would get zero indication there's a patch. Correct?
The only if somehow I miss it, the only way I know is that my Windows firewall tries to block heroes again every time it's patched.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. I was making a joke, and then I kind of thought about it. I'm like, yeah, actually, you know what? Hearthstone, as much as I kind of tease them, handles this rather elegantly. So, you make a very good point, Dunk, in that sometimes our patches change so many heroes that it would be ridiculous to do it one hero at a time. But maybe the landing page is patch whatever the number is, and you can click around and explore, and it has a grid-based system with all the heroes. You can click on the hero to read what changed. It'd be really cool if it prioritized it by like your games played with heroes or what level they're at.
Your favorites or something. That would be sick.
Yeah. So say Kyle's Butcher player and on his team, logs in, Butcher's right at the top, like, hey, I see you play this. And, don't get clippy into Heroes of the Storm, but I see you play this hero a lot. Maybe you would like to read about his changes.
I also found out today that your quests, after you've played enough games, will start focusing around the type of heroes you like to play. So the game already knows what you're into.
That explains why I keep getting specialists in StarCraft.
There you go.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, there was a guy on Reddit today. He was complaining that he's gotten the same 3 quests for the past year, and all he plays is Abathur. So that's all he gets.
What?
Dude, that's amazing.
I saw that thread. I didn't click on it because I was just like, okay, this doesn't affect me. I'm not going to read it. So is there like a blue reply in there saying, oh, hey, our system curates it? You're blowing my mind. I didn't know that.
There's a lot of weird bugs in this system, too, this last release, and we'll be getting to those as well.
Yeah, well, that's...
The mod stuff.
That's insane. Well, yeah, okay. Well, it's funny, Dunk, you kind of... So what Kyle and I are kind of throwing our arms up about, you're like, well, this is just the way of things. You have an unfocused comp with probably 3 different win conditions spread across 5 different heroes.
Yeah, that's about the gist of it.
So your answer, it's just heroes, baby. That's your answer.
pretty much.
Okay.
It's not bad. Like, I mean, I think Hero League is the least tilting place right now because I'm fully expecting the circus, and I'm actually having a great time. It's when I'm in like quick match that I'm thinking like, what? This has no logic anymore. Like, I didn't get to meet you in the draft and know you're tilted, so you're just an illogical person in quick match. But I did go by your stream the other day, DunkTrain, and you were having a really cool conversation. And actually, first of all, love the Bam Bam streams. It's so awesome to have such a candid response on every side as to what's going on, particularly when it comes to something like level 20 Stitches and just how ridiculous and powerful some of these abilities can be. You were doing an analysis of the Western Clash, and a day later you're playing Hero League and talking about a gray main who wouldn't dive in. You said something very interesting there, that if you sort of have a role to perform, just do it in Hero League so everyone else does their thing. The gray main was unwilling to dive the Valla, and since he didn't dive her, even though he wouldn't get the kill, Valla was comfortable, provided poke for the whole fight, no one could engage.
Yeah.
And that blew my mind. And it's so hard to, step outside yourself and maybe your ego. I don't want to be the guy who dies. I'm going to get called out. But you were right there. If the gray main just dove following the Diablo, everything has a chance to go better than if we do nothing at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just don't... People, I think, don't think of the game in terms of, like, what is my role on this team? In the sense of, like, how do we win? Like, how do we actually win this game? People just kind of do their own thing. Like, oh, I pick Greymane every game, and I play Greymane the same way every game. I stay in range form, and then I execute someone when they get low, right? That's not necessarily a bad strategy, but if your composition ends up where that's not a viable strategy, I feel like very few people adapt. It's like the people who play Knight of Cigar every game. Well, you can't split push them out for some reason. Maybe if you had gone Devouring Maw, it would be great, but people just aren't willing to adapt on the fly.
Seeing that with the Butchers now.
Well, are you just seeing, again, Butchers who aren't aware of the changes?
I'm perplexed by Butcher's win rate. He's currently sneaking up to 60% in quick match, and a little above that depending on what your league is. Well, 55% Hero League, that's up about 1%. Yeah, I haven't fought a winning Butcher this week, so I'm not sure what's happening there.
I can't really speak to that. I've only played one game this week on Butcher. It was quick match. I loved it. It was a little rough, but we still won handily. By the time I actually got my 200 stacks, it was disgusting. And personally, I really like the direction of the change, because as a Butcher player, I like that I'm involved in the team fights constantly the whole game. And also as a Diablo fan, Butcher shouldn't be farming the entire game.
I like the fantasy, and I get the argument, but I think the changes are really bad for gameplay and balance.
Interesting.
Like, I mean, I totally agree. I love the fantasy of the Butcher getting rewarded for kills and stuff, but now, I mean, I've had Butchers in my GM games get fully stacked at like 6 minutes and then just start 3-shotting squishies, and there's nothing they can do about it. Like, it doesn't feel good when that happens on the winning or losing team, honestly. Like, the game is just decided with whether the Butcher gets stacked early a lot of the times right now.
Do you think there's a middle ground without going all the way back to Butcher just being a lane farmer?
I'm sure there is, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what it is exactly. I think if their intention was to get him... So I think the problem with this change is they're going to have to balance it around non-competitive, basically. Old Butcher was more easily balanced around competitive because of the increased impact of farming lanes compared to heroes. And in competitive, you don't get that many kills. So being able to more consistently reach your eventual power spike was better for competitive. This design of Butcher is more flavorful and thematic, and I like it for that reason, but I think they just have to balance him around. He's never going to be in competitive, and that's okay.
Interesting. And how strange to sort of compare this to what happened in the Western Clash, where we saw almost no mages at all. And then at home, we're sort of punishing those mages more, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't see hardly any mages anymore. Even in my Hero League games, it's trickled down. It used to be I would see still, quite a few mages, but I see maybe a Kel'Thuzad or a Gul'dan, once every 5 games or something. Less than that.
It's not safe to be Gul'dan, right? To stand still at any point in your day is a horrible, horrible decision. In fact, you've been playing a lot of Zul'jin, and I love the guy too, but we're going to guillotine so we can be far enough back and survive.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Look how
it just feels so dangerous.
You had a really
range.
You brought up a good point earlier, off air, obviously. And again, Doug, I'd like to get your take on it, but Kyle and I were kind of talking about just the dominance of Valla, and it came up in relationship to Zul'jin, because of this, how dangerous it is to stand still, and how Valla is just king because she can do what Zul'jin does, but move while doing it. Cassia kind of suffers for the same reason. Tychus, who could be more akin, suffers for a similar reason, much like Cassie, because of the range of their ranged attack. I'm surprised we haven't seen that reined in a little bit, or some range or some mobility given back to the other auto-attacking heroes.
It's tough. I think Greymane right now is pretty much the de facto best range damage in the game, unless you have an Ariel, where Valla really excels. But those two, it's tough because maybe the stats don't show it, or it doesn't really feel like they're oppressive, perhaps. But I really feel like so many of the other range heroes, if you want to be optimal, are kind of not in the meta. But I also feel like you can play those other range heroes and you're not that badly off. Like, there have been times in the game's history where if you aren't playing one of the best two heroes in a role, you're a disaster and you're not helping the team. But I don't feel like that right now. I feel like you can play almost any range damage and still contribute a reasonable amount. Like, I don't think I've ever gotten mad at someone just for picking not a Valla or Greymane, unless it like really doesn't fit the comp or something.
It's good to hear.
But do you agree, Kyle? Because it didn't sound like you did earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, I think flavor-wise, Valla's not something I want to be playing. It probably is the biggest mark of shame on my heroes roster that I have been so uninterested in Valla for so long. I feel like, much like Sonya, it's something that I have to get over. But at the end of the day, it's a video game, and I gotta want to play it.
Yeah, I think Valla is like, I don't know, for me personally, that theme, that fantasy doesn't appeal to me whatsoever, but mechanically I find Valla to be pretty satisfying. So I like playing her. I haven't played her very much this season at all, but she was like one of my top 2 played or something last season.
I'm right there with you. Like, I like locking on and vaulting, but just something about Valla doesn't grab me from a fantasy perspective. So we've already talked about Garrosh, Kyle. Before we kind of move on and start talking about Hanamura leaving the battleground rotation, were there any other points about Garrosh? I saw you brought a lot of stats with you today. I didn't want to just steamroll over it.
No, merely my shock at all the heroes that are joining her down there, particularly guys like Thrall, Zarya, and Ariel, who have been so powerful for so long. But also, part of those notes was a surprise Shire change, which already happened some time ago. This was live since the Stukov release, and they made some adjustments to him. Apparently, we didn't notice much.
Yeah, apparently now it does double damage to minions. Base health was increased. Starting duration was increased by 5 seconds. They adjusted the weapon swing to feel more responsive. Flame Breath has its base damage increased. The damage over time effect now happens in half the previous time, which is that's the crazy one for me. And then Savage Charge no longer has the 1/4 of a second damage delay after punting the target, and the base damage has been increased. So the Dragon Knight just across the board is significantly more powerful.
The damage change doesn't matter a thing, except for the fact that you no longer have those sweet in the camera and then they die kind of shots. They instead kind of scoot across the ground as though they were shuffle-morted.
I'm always a sucker for good physics deaths in Heroes of the Storm, especially now with Garrosh. Mid-Wrecking Ball deaths are my favorite thing in the game right now.
Yeah. Dude, the idea of ninja buffs, like this, like they just put it live right and they don't tell anyone, the idea of that and then seeing if the community notices and reacts is like such a cool concept for me. Because if you had asked me, like, does the Dragon Knight feel different lately? I probably would have said, yeah, a little bit, but I just assumed that, like, the less delay was because they fixed something, like, not a big deal. I wouldn't have called all of these changes, which is amazing to me. And, like, it makes me wonder, like, if they just did balance patches, like, let's say something's undertuned, if they just did a balance patch to buff something up, would people notice? Like, if, you know, a hero that was bad just got a little bump, you know?
Yeah, I think that's great, right? Like, what if they just went in and gave Li Ming 3 damage on Magic Missile, and that's it? Like, you get to skip the whole quick match madness, the whole Hero League Day 1 madness, and just have the Li Ming players maybe feel a little better at the end of the day.
It would be really interesting. I mean, I'm all for transparency and stuff, but just this made me kind of wonder, like, what if they made other changes like that?
This is very interesting because this week I distinctly remember at one point having nothing to do in the Dragon Knight, so I started whacking on a couple minions, and I felt like I was doing nothing. So I can't remember the last time I actually smacked a minion with the Dragon Knight, but it must have been awful before.
Look, now you got double damage, but still no splash like on the Terror. So
yeah, right.
Probably still a bad idea.
Right.
Bad way to spend your time.
Like it's so funny that you bring this up because I remember that happening earlier this week. So, all right, well let's move on to Hanamura leaving the rotation of Hero League. Did it also leave unranked and quick match?
Everything.
Yes,
everything.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just
it got
gone.
the full Haunted Mines treatment.
Okay. Wow. I thought it was just Hero League. So last 2 times you were on Dunk, I believe you were lamenting Hanamura's, well, there's no other way to say it, existence.
Yeah. I think that's a nice way to say it.
Yeah. So, I mean, anyone here pouring one out for Hanamura?
I am, but it's dumb. It's because I love Zul'jin, and I feel like I figured it out to the point that I was a huge bully in the 4-man lane and enjoyed myself. I didn't think that made for good mechanics. I think, particularly now that I'm watching the International, there's some bloat on that map, and the International's the Dota tournament going on right now, and people have been talking about Dota, looking at the amazing production value. But it reminds you of some things you left for. Last hitting, I couldn't care less. My friends all hated it, so it was great that was kind of the excuse we could get them onto Heroes. But what I really see when I watch Dota right now is fortified structures. Oh my! This button you can press that says, "I don't want to lose the game yet. I want to delay this game by 20 minutes." It's madness. And there's runes, and there's Roshan, and there's mercs that don't do anything. Like, I still am amazed at how much knowledge, and I could name all the characters I still possess. But there's so much bloat there. And it got me wondering, like, if you took every hero's map and layered them together, all objectives at once, you may start to reach the complexity of something like Dota. And for heroes, I don't think the buff kind of rune on the ground system, the thing you get from the Hanamura mercenaries, fits. It feels weird.
That's interesting. I think that was one of the only systems from the map that I thought would be worth exploring further. Like, I felt like the payloads really contributed to a lot of unsatisfying game wins. Like, there's something fundamentally satisfying about actually going and blowing up the core, and I feel like Towers of Doom kind of has the same problem where sometimes the game ending is just not satisfying. It's not interesting. You just channel something, you just push a payload in. Nobody really cares. So, I don't know. I think the item-esque thing, like the activatables, I think that could have been okay in another map, in another universe.
And the lack of the core. It's so interesting that when Towers of Doom first came up, we were all a little bummed about it, I think. But over time, we learned the sort of Hearthstone, you can always make a comeback, hit points don't matter, bro, in the early game, and like everybody fights to the bitter end on Towers of Doom, and I love it.
That's a really good point. But now, Kyle, because I'm in Dunk's camp, imagine you could drop a turret outside of the shrine in Towers of Doom.
Oh, turrets are just awesome.
They're kind of cool.
Like, I get easily motion sick, so any game that has a turret, I'm like in. First-person shooter, hell yeah, I don't have to aim. I'm going to go shoot bombs and chuck grenades over some wall.
Or the heal, or the Dragon Spirit. I think any of it would be fine if you went and took it to Towers of Doom. I don't know. I don't want to beat up on Hanamura too much. It's been beat up so much, but
sure, no,
but
definitely.
I don't know. I think for me it's that it wasn't the same push and pull that we have in so many other maps. Like damn near every other battleground, and I'll just keep using Towers of Doom as the example because it's the only other battleground in the game where we can't attack the core directly. And it's when you, like in Hanamura, when you win a team fight around the enemy's payload, you can't do anything with that payload. It just slowly recedes, and you go and play tug of war alone on your own payload.
Well, and
in Towers of Doom, when you do that, you get the shrine.
Would you guys rather have the first payloads crossing and subsequent payloads somehow crossing, or that there is one payload that the two teams fight over?
I think one payload the two teams fight over would be a lot more interactive, and the whole reason I come to Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah. I think even if you had multiple tracks still and potentially multiple payloads spawning at the same time, like being able to fight over one objective is so core to the game. Like if you win the fight, you get the objective. Like that's how every other map works. And right now, like you win a fight on their payload. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely. There's a lack of wind in the sails there, I think, is what's going on. I didn't even think about having multiple payloads up that both teams could interact and fight over. I would love to see that. Somebody please go hotfix Hanamura and let me try that out. So, whatever the case is, no Hanamura for the time being. Thing I'm going to miss the most is just the visuals. It's a gorgeous map.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sad there's not another Overwatch map to have kind of in the rotation. It translates so well to the Nexus.
If I could have a Hanamura skin for Cursed Hollow, I would opt in to play that. Absolutely. Like if you could just have Cursed Hollow redone in Hanamura, like I would play that.
Give me some cherry blossoms.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that snow thing all done up? Snowball fight, was it?
I do not remember.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It was a brawl or something. You like grabbed snowballs, and I think they snowed all over Cursed Hollow for it. So it's been done. They've changed the look before.
Yeah. Well, let's move on then and talk about the armor UI again. We talked about it last week because it was on the PTR. I was singing its praises, and I think Kyle, both you and I talked about how we would like to see a little more nuance to it. Let's somehow find a nice way, a non-cluttered way to show the other types of armor in the game. And there's been quite a bit of chatter on Reddit about the issue as well, and on the forums. But it's in the live game. I love the anecdote you have in the notes, Kyle. I love that this is the one thing you decided was important enough to write down.
It's true, but it was the one I was most curious about because I feel like we've been overdrafting Uther, particularly in the diamond range. As people just go, yeah, it's good. And I'm like, they have an Asmodan. We don't recover from the poke. We need to augment this. So I was really curious to finally get a feel for what Uther's armor contribution was like for the team. And it's short, and you gotta say, like, you don't engage after you get armor. Like, that is the armor comes out, and whatever fight you're currently having is better now. But I'm really seeing how many people see, I got the armor, guys, and then they go.
Oh man, yeah,
that's really good. So do you think it's helping a little bit, Kyle, with what you've been talking about for the past couple of weeks that have kind of been the bane of your existence in games, which is the fights that never end?
Has armor changed that? No, but I do. People run from my Gazlo now. I hit level 20, and I get that armor permanently over my head. People are scared. It's fun.
Awesome. Well, they're not afraid of Garrosh, who has it from the beginning, because they just mow me down.
Yeah. Well, that's Chromie is huge right now, and that's pretty rough on Garrosh.
Absolutely. But Dunk, what do you think? I thought it was a pretty an elegant UI solution, but it's only a piece of the armor puzzle.
Yeah, I really like it. I'm all for clarity in pretty much every game situation. I'm one of the people who would like to be able to click on enemy heroes and see their exact health and arm, like mana numbers, see all their stats. So adding this, I think, is great. It's clean. It's concise. I agree. maybe some way to show physical versus spell armor versus flat armor would be ideal. But for a first implementation, I'm super happy with it. And since I think this is the only like UI related topic we have on the schedule, I'd also like to mention how cool it is to get the little cooldown timer next to your cursor when you try to cast something that's on cooldown right now. That feature is so good. It's a feature that I've seen in another game before. I'm super glad they ported it to Heroes because it's amazing.
Really helpful.
Fun anecdote question: What is the thing you spam the most that you see? Because for me, it's the mount. It's the mount spam.
Yeah, probably mount. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes like on Uther, I'll be like trying to spam W to get it as fast as possible or whatever, and just like watching it tick down. I'm like, no, it's not going to be a time. But yeah, heals make me panic when I'm trying to cast them and I see the cooldown.
So you love it, but every now and then it gives you puts you in despair earlier than usual.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I'm very happy with it as well. I understand why it was added with Garrosh. And not that I'm not grateful it was already added, but I'm also loving all of the discussion around how to make it even better and show the other forms of armor. So keep that chat going because I'm sure the team is listening.
Yeah.
Well, let's move in and talk about some Heroes esports because the Western Clash was this past weekend, and it was a little one-sided. It's a little one-sided. It was nice
in multiple ways.
Yeah, it was nice to have a different person winning or a different team winning the Western Clash, but yeah, and Dunk, I know again you had a lot of thoughts on the Western Clash. Kyle was talking as we were writing the notes earlier today. He's like, talking about your stream where you were commenting on engagements and whatnot. So what did you think about this past weekend?
Overall, I would say a little disappointed how sloppy NA teams looked, but it's what I expected given how they looked in our HGC. Fnatic is still just the only Western team that looks impeccably clean in almost every game. And that teamwork really is impressive, and they deserve props for it. Outside of that, talking about the meta and stuff, I felt like the meta was a little bit on the unhealthy side. There was just so much like double tank, double healer going around, and that's kind of like my least favorite sort of thing to see. So for me, the meta was really a negative in terms of enjoyability of the event.
And it leads to a viewership that just makes it feel like nothing happened. And the casters are stoked, the battles commence, and two tanks slam to each other, and it lasts and it lasts. And if there was a Kel'Thuzad drafted there, he'd be on cooldown for the next half that. He'd still come out the other side of that 8 seconds with something to cast on. But it simply wouldn't matter because it'd be yet again removed by the double support or go into the front line.
Yeah, watching like 5v5s last 45 seconds and then everyone just kind of walks away after. I do enjoy the longer fights of Heroes. It's one of the things that really made me enjoy the game when I first came and started playing it, was that fights weren't over because someone got picked off in 0.2 seconds at the start every time. Like in League where I came from, but right now it's just way too far on the other side of the pendulum. Like, yeah.
Well, so do you think it's meta dependent? It's because of this? It's because of the composition of the teams? Because I too enjoy the longer fights, but not when it's this just two people with a ton of health, two people with abilities to restore that health. I liked it more when we kind of had these mixed comps in the early days when it almost looked like a WoW party where you had DP, like you had your DPS, you had your healer, and you had your tank, and fights still went on for a while because of the skill, not necessarily just because of raw hit points.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what actually causes this sort of meta to happen. Like, there's just so many factors to consider, and you see some blow-up comps still succeed, right? If they get the specific draft for it. It seems to be like the generic plan of all the teams is like stacking tanks and healers right now.
Yeah, Illidan's hunts are so important. in those comps, and they tend to be, a second off here, and that causes the loss for the entire game, right? Comes down to a decision like that. I was watching you review a team on Towers of Doom where they got a Genji. It's like, sweet Genji, but they mixed an Illidan with it. Well, now you have nothing to actually make the Genji do his work. So if we... actually, another example of that, one I thought was very interesting, was the Brightwing Stukov into Lunara to just negate her poison completely with a bunch of free, cheap resetting heals.
Yeah.
So if I could have you take a step back, because I'm real confused. I come by your stream and you're working hard, and the chat's full of NA lulls. Like, where did this begin? What is the problem with NA? And how do they fix it?
Where did this begin? Probably about a year ago, I think. We really saw like the European teams, I think, step up towards the Korean level we were seeing at Globals, and the NA teams just kind of fell behind. They weren't exhibiting the same team synergies. There were a lot more, like there were a ton of roster changes in NA around that time. I think they're not as much as there's like roster apocalypse in EU as well. I feel like Fnatic and Dig, kind of like the big competitors from the European region that we've seen in the past, didn't have as much roster swaps, and NA has had them consistently, except like Tempo Storm. But they, everyone thought Tempo Storm was going to be like the savior of NA when they crushed at Fall Regional, and then they kind of showed up to BlizzCon, did nothing. So I don't know. I don't really know how you fix it or whatever. European teamwork right now is just so much better, and maybe it's because the teams below them are better, so it forces the good ones to get better faster. Maybe there's a bigger player base there. It just is what it is.
That's sad, because I'd love a fix, right? Because we want to cheer for our home teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I think we, back in the midseason brawl, we kind of got a breath of fresh air in NA, but overall, I mean, Kyle, like you're saying, how why has this been going on so long? I think it's because overall the results reinforce the NA lulls. I mean, it's really I think what it boils down to. It's not. I don't think it's that North America is more prone to trolls than Europe. I don't think that's the case at all. But Europe keeps kicking ass. So
yeah,
not going to sit around and troll their own teams as much.
True. But I am very curious about these pick rates, these poor unpicked heroes, and some amazing win rates for things like Medivh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was the thing that was most surprising to me in the tournament.
That was a 7-0.
Are you still a big Medivh fan, Dunk? And as a viewer, are you the type of person that gets excited around certain picks?
I used to be a really big Medivh fan. When he first came out, I was like super excited for him, but the more I see him in competitive, the more I think he just lends towards the boring games rather than the exciting ones. Like when Medivh first came out, everyone was hypothesizing like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so cool to portal in and blow someone up, or like, make sick plays aggressively with all these tools, right? But then in reality, it's just like Leyline Seal gets used defensively every fight. Protect defends from their single target blow up. The portals are just to disengage every fight over task walls or whatever. Like, it's like I was so excited conceptually about Medivh's capacity to enable a team to be aggressive, but it turns out he's just better if you just always use him to run away. So at this point, I don't like it anymore.
And I was so excited to see Butchers, Zul'jins. I mean, granted, that wasn't on the radar at the time, but things that are immobile, people suffering today in this meta, like maybe Gul'dan even, but instead we just throw Vallas through the portals because they're already good, let's make them better.
Yeah.
So there's not some sort of sweet, like, oh, this combo's, and we'll take an all-death trait team. Like, how awesome would that be? There's nothing cute going on.
Yeah. Can we come back to the mages? I know we mentioned it briefly, and there's been a couple comments about how strong Chromie is at the moment, but mages were more or less nowhere to be found with the exception of Chromie, and if you would consider Medivh a mage, I would argue He doesn't really fall into that category. But when did that happen? For the longest time, one of my favorite things about Heroes Esports was this is the one place where I could tune back in and like, finally, good Li Ming play. I can see it again. And I didn't get to see any of that.
It really feels like the Genji kind of forced all that out of the meta. The transition towards Genji and either comps that enable Genji or comps that build double tank or double support to not die instantly to the Genji means there's no room for a mage. Like, you can't really play a mage into double tank, double support. You'll never kill anyone. The tanks will just walk at you, and all the tanks in the game that people are picking right now can kill any mage 1v1, and the mages can't really kill them. And if you can't kill people in your rotation, what's the point of being a mage, right? Like, think about how much spell armor has kind of gone around lately. There's so much more spell armor than before in the game. So mages are just, like, why pick a mage when there's a hero who does it better? Almost always.
It's really frightening, too, to just see how maybe deathball-y clunky we make our engagements. Because you can't be off to the side anymore. You can't be that Li Ming firing from the side because you'll get Genji'd. Or maybe you'll end up in a cocoon and be stuck there for the whole 8 seconds because you weren't by the group.
Yeah, it's like they're just too vulnerable. Yeah. I don't know what else you can say. Like, how are you supposed to protect a mage against Genji, man? It's just... And how's the mage supposed to hit Genji with any skills when he flips around?
Well, we see an increase in Diablo and Stitches and ETC, and Diablo does a decent job of juggling Genji long enough to keep him locked down, but in a pro scene, you're not going to blow everything to stop one Genji while the rest of the team's dealing with everything else.
Yeah. And Diablo, Stitches, they both have spell armor. They got spell armor. Like, you can't play mages into Diablo, 25 permanent spell armor. Stitches, dampen magic. Like a Nubarak, permanent spell armor. What other mages are even common? Dahaka, you can't burst Dahaka. He's got burrow and an adaptation if he needs it. Like all the tanks right now are so good against mages.
That's interesting. And I guess with Stukov too, you got some more AoE healing. So you're getting rid of a nice flame strike that got everyone loosened up for the fight in an instant. The entirely unpicked heroes are as follows from the event: Artanis, Asmodan, Cho'Gall, Gazlo, Kerrigan, Murky, Nazebo, Nova, Ragnaros, surprising, Raynor to the surprise of nobody, but Rexar, Samudo, Valera, Zagara, and Zul'jin, all entirely unpicked throughout the entire tournament this past weekend.
The Ragnaros is a surprise.
I think the Rag isn't a surprise to me, actually. Like, I've felt for maybe a patch or two that Rag and Thrall are pretty much always liabilities to their team and don't contribute enough.
Interesting.
It just feels like you're not rewarded enough to be one of those heroes. You're not rewarded enough to be an Artanis or a Thrall or a Ragnaros compared to just picking another tank, right? The damage output differential is not high enough. The tankiness differential is too big. Like, the utility they provide is just way different. So yeah, I feel like it's really the second tank is kind of forcing those bruisers out of the meta.
That's really sad. I really get excited when I see a Thrall 1v1ing the enemy tank to keep them under control while the fight goes on. Same with Artanis, and Ragnaros could serve that too. But you're right, on paper, and certainly in my hero leagues, if we do a double tank, but one of those ends up being the Bruiser, Ragnaros, or Thrall, even Alarak struggles a lot in that unless they're really susceptible to silences over there.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I've seen a fall off in that as well. So, you talked about the trends, talked about the meta. Eastern Clash is coming up. Dunk, do you expect to see the same kind of compositions, the same kind of trends going into the Eastern Clash?
Yeah, I think Western Clash got the meta pretty correct. Conceptually, even though I think the teams were sloppy, I think they have kind of identified a few of the best strategies to play the game, and I wouldn't expect Eastern Clash to be too much different. Cho'Gall will probably see play at Eastern Clash with Ariel at some point. We know the Korean scene values that highly. It'll at least be banned if an enemy team gets Ariel, because I think they still respect that. I'm not sure. I haven't followed the last couple weeks of their performance, but I know for a while they really considered Cho'Gall Ariel to be insane. Other than that, yeah, I expect them to be playing really similar stuff.
Okay. Well, shall we talk a couple bugs that folks out there might want to be aware of with the new patch?
They're a little important.
Yeah. So first on the docket is Karazim. His Radiant Dash is currently placing you in a random position on the target. What?
Seems that 50% of the time you might end up on the other side of them for a body block, which would be a nice buff. 50% of the time you end up, or 25% of the time you're ending up on the side, and then the other 25 works as intended.
What the hell?
I think. Sorry, to interrupt, but I think Zero Tool's blinks onto targets are also messed up in a similar way. I don't play Zero Tool much myself, but I think I was listening to like Fan or someone on their stream talk about how Zero Tool's blinks onto targets, like with Seeker in the Dark and Vorpal Blade, are maybe also experiencing similar, like you might show up on a random side of them type thing.
Oh,
which is a really big deal.
Okay.
Yeah, and also Fend apparently on Cassia might send you on a little side journey around the front as well. Which with a cone ability. Oh my god.
That's the worst.
Yeah, that'd be devastating.
Oh, it's I was cooling off my teammates. They looked hot. Just giving them a nice fan. Oh, that's so oh man.
I haven't seen that one personally. But I don't know.
All right, so when I see that happen in the next game with a Cassia, maybe I'll go easy on them.
Yeah.
What are you doing? I don't know. Samuro Illusion Master is also having an issue with the swaps. That will be fixed next patch.
Old problem, and very excited to get this one fixed. This is when you take Illusion Master. If you are attacking somebody and want to switch to their illusion, you teleport to your illusion, no trouble there. But your illusion that is left where your body was is not doing your previous action. In fact, it kind of stops, thinks about it computer style, and then starts walking just like a computer. So there's no real nuance, or in fact, much of the trickery that is required to pull that off.
Yeah, it gets bored and wanders off, basically. Just not really what you want to be happening when you're trying to be tricky. And then the Stukov healing icon is gone. This is driving me completely insane. You've got a green kind of stink cloud now when it's on you, but I don't know. This wasn't something that jumped out at me immediately, but once Kyle pointed it out to me, I'm like, oh, yeah, it's I don't know. I don't like it. I feel like it's not unless you're really looking for it, it's not incentivizing my teammates to spread the love.
Yeah, I've noticed a dramatic decrease in people putting meaningful effort into spreading Stukov heals. It's been very frustrating for me as a Stukov player.
It made me feel great. I love feeling like I can contribute there. I love having Ariels and get to be more aggressive. Stukov, bumping elbows with my buddies before I head off. I feel like I've definitely been responsible this week for carrying a pathogen to nowhere land.
Yeah. So has this been confirmed as a bug?
No, this is an intentional choice.
Intentional, yeah.
Oh, I hate it. I hate this intentional choice.
Yeah, they said they were worried about clutter, particularly things like Abathur hats that occupy the same space.
Okay, so have the symbiote take precedence over it. It's not like there's 5 symbiotes all the time.
Yeah, or just make it smaller. I mean, I agree it was probably cluttering because it was too big, but I don't see why you wouldn't just, make it smaller, but still noticeable. Right now, the green mist is just like, I can't even tell, honestly, if the green mist is on me. If I have a Stukov in my game, I'm not paying attention to that. Like, it's so hard to notice.
Right. You're mostly focusing on where you're aiming with whatever it is you're aiming with. It's
and
not
where
like
the enemy's shots are coming from.
You're
You
not
don't look at your own hero to identify skill effects.
Exactly. And it's too subtle. And I can understand why it's subtle because it's this effect on your body and there's other abilities in the game. I'll use Living Bomb as an example that affect your body. So I can see where if the green glow was too bright, that would interfere with your ability to kind of notice that something like Living Bomb is on you. But yeah, just give an icon back. I like your idea, Dunk. Make it smaller. I would argue for making some type of hierarchy where one ability might be more important than the heal icon over. Maybe keep the green glow as it is, but also add the icon back so that if you have something like a symbiote on and you choose to code it so that the symbiote kind of overrides the healing icon over you, at least you have something on you like the green glow to identify that it's been spread to you. And those are the bugs you should know for this week.
There's one more interaction that's maybe worth talking about.
Oh,
that's
go right ahead.
Potentially a design decision, maybe a bug. Garrosh's E and his level 7 Into the Fray talent both can be activated to try and throw an ally or an enemy, respectively, whichever one you're activating. Mm-hmm. And if that person gets out of the range between whatever small timing window is between you activating the ability and it actually throwing them, it goes on full cooldown, and the person doesn't get thrown. Nothing happens. I don't know how you guys feel about this. To me, this is something that's really unintuitive and goes against the flow of like all the rest of the game's abilities, where if it's a projectile, it can be dodged or something, but it won't go on but you can't interrupt basic abilities and have them go on cooldown. That's just not how any other ability functions. You expect something to happen if you press a button. Heroics can be interrupted, but they go on 10-second cooldown. It's clear what happened. This is like the only ability I know of where you can activate this ability, have it go on full cooldown, and literally nothing happen, and there's no feedback as to why. And I think it's a poor choice in the first place to have you able to press this button and it just not do anything.
Well, I wasn't aware of this.
Got to be a bug,
but
right? I have experienced this with a monk dashing away, a Li Ming.
Mm-hmm.
In those instances, of course, I was like, they deserve to get away. What a sweet timing. But my ability was on cooldown and not like the 7-second heroic kind of punishment, full-blown length.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time hearing about it. It's not something I feel I experienced this week, but I would argue, I would assume that it's a bug. If this is a design choice, I'm in your camp, Dunk, where no, please no. Do something different. Even if they treat it like a heroic where they give you a cooldown, but a shorter one than usual.
Yeah, for some reason the reason I don't know if it's just strictly a bug or a design choice is because there was a blue post that was kind of talking about the combination of like Q and E, I think, or something like that, and it wasn't really clear what part he was addressing with one of his sentences or something, if it was related to the E thing I'm talking about. But yeah, some clarification on that would be great.
Interesting. They have done, odd things to sort of rein in abilities, and while that would be very wrong of them to say, like, oh yeah, this is really powerful ability. If you miss, it's out forever. Let's not have that. But there are like things that are overclunked, like Dahaka's tongue, for balance, and that could be wicked fast, the fastest whip in the West, if they wanted it to be.
Oh right, well that is an intention, and Dunk, you already kind of talked about it. Like if it's a skill shot and you miss, that's the whole point. That's fine. But this is such a bizarre ability, which is why, like I said, I had such a weird reaction to it the first time I tried Garrosh, because it wasn't how I expected it to work. I wasn't expecting to have to be looking for this tiny little horde symbol to make sure I was throwing the correct thing.
To sort of echo a conversation we had last week, is Wrecking Ball fun for you guys? Because people complain about, Chromie's killing them from the other side of a screen that they didn't see coming. A cursed bullet. A lot of unfun abilities might be sneaking in people's opinions. So Garrosh, fun to be thrown. Sucks to be thrown, but you're okay with it?
It sucks to be thrown. I love the threat of it. It is a fantastically designed threat.
Yeah, I love Garrosh. I think he's really fun to play with. I think he's interesting to play against. To me, Garrosh feels like the well-designed version of Diablo, in a sense. Oh. His pulls and displacements are a little more difficult to utilize. They are more compelling effects. They look cooler. To me, Diablo is like the simpler version of Garrosh that's not as exciting. So I love Garrosh. I think he's great.
When you're making a Garrosh team in your head, what does it look like?
Okay, I think there's two. So I think you absolutely need to either double heal for Garrosh or double tank for Garrosh. The fact is he doesn't have the reliable initiation and he doesn't have an escape mechanism, so he needs either a second tank to cover for him in those situations, or he needs double healer so that he can't get bursted down. So if you're going one of those two ways, I like Garrosh with like a primary tank too, like Garrosh Diablo, Garrosh Arthas. I don't think you really want to be playing something like Garrosh and Nubarak. I don't feel like they have great synergy. Garrosh can't really follow up on the dive target that a Nubarak wants to go for. You want to be a little more brawly on your front line if you're going double tank with him. On the other side, let's say you're solo tanking Garrosh, then you want double healer, and my current recommendation for double healer is pretty much always one healer who prevents the single target blow up and one healer who heals off the poke and spread damage. So like an Uther Ariel or like a... Well, to be honest, Uther's just the best healer to pair with any other healer right now because of his armor, but like an Uther Ariel or like a Brightwing Mouth or just any combination of two healers so one can protect the first target from getting blown up and the second to kind of AoE heal.
Is that what we need for Brightwing right now as a second healer? Can she do it by herself?
I think Brightwing can work in solo healer comps, but you have to identify that your win condition is basically a one-shot on someone that is enabled by an Emerald Wind zoning the rest of the team in a dive-style composition. Just a traditional solo healer Brightwing in a normal comp that's not really abusing her global, because let's be honest, in Hero League, you're not going to be able to abuse the global like Fnatic can. You're going to get generally crushed compared to a traditional healer.
Well said.
Wonderful. Well, before we move in and talk about two specific battlegrounds that have rejoined the rotation, let's thank our patrons over at patreon.com/ITN who make recurring guest hosts like Mr. DunkTrain here possible and also support this here podcast. This week we wanted to thank Wade M, Lloyd D, David B, Cowboy Kyle, spelled with a K. Not Kyle, but Cowboy, spelled with a K. Well, and Kyle.
I don't go as Cowboy Kyle online. I'm sorry.
Aw, that's such a shame. I have this amazing image in my head of you dressed up like Cowboy Curtis from freaking Pee-wee's Playhouse. And then
Stream goal.
Can we make that a Patreon goal? Like, let's do a whole episode of Into the Nexus in person in the style of Pee-wee's Playhouse. We'll have a word of the day. We'll all scream when it's said. It'll be great. Also, Craig L., thank you very much on this episode for supporting us. If you're out there, if you're listening to the Nexus and you get some value out of this here podcast and you'd like to give us some value in return, check out patreon.com/ITN. Now, let's have a discussion about PvE Battlegrounds because they're back. They're back. Let's do it.
Choose a talent.
Choose a talent.
Talent? Ha, that seems generous.
Yeah, no clue what that means.
All right, I'm talking, of course, about Battlefield of Eternity and Blackheart's Bay. You're gonna be seeing them in Hero League now if you've been playing this week, and if you're gonna be playing in the near future. Who knows how long that'll be? Because my God, the map rotations are so fast and furious lately. It's been difficult for me to keep my brain around what the heck I'm picking on what map. But that's it. Actually, can I sidebar? Can I pull this thread, Kyle?
Go for it.
All right, Dunk. I know. So this is something that I have mentioned a little bit on the show, but mostly just when Kyle and I hang out and talk. I think map rotations are happening too much.
Yes, I absolutely agree. So when map rotations initially kind of started, there was one map rotation for multiple months, if I'm not mistaken. And I think there's been one 6 weeks ago and 6 weeks before that at this point.
Almost.
Or something like that.
Almost as frequently as hero releases.
Yeah, but I suspect the reason for this is, one, they're kind of like flexing their what does map rotations feel like and trying to get a good feel for that. And two is in response to the fact that a lot of people, had that Hanamura outcry. They're trying to figure out, how they should respond to that. Like they made one rotation where they left Hanamura in and people, raged. So I think they kind of were obligated to do another rotation sooner than they would have preferred to take Hanamura out and when they disabled it,
I think
So
the-
to me,
am I giving them too much credit thinking that, Stukov, okay, Circle, Pad, Braxis, let's not have Lurking Arm and Stukov week 1, in for the kill on Garrosh, you reset your healing, let's not have Infernal Shrines week 1, or do you think they're not going to that level?
I mean, that I definitely would be willing to believe that that kind of concern gets brought up. I mean, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I see. My gut reaction though is that I see why you would be concerned about that, but I would almost prefer you not curate the selection of battlegrounds around each and every hero, because I mean, once you do start utilizing that as a tool, when do you stop using it? Because I certainly do think every hero release is too often for a battleground rotation.
I don't think you want battleground rotations that frequently.
No,
to me, I think you want a battleground rotation maybe once in the middle of a season to kind of freshen it up a little bit. And that's the most I would want to see battleground rotations. Once at the start of a new season of Hero League and once in the middle to kind of freshen it up. Other than that, like any more often than that, I think is way too much. I agree.
Well, and we're getting this feedback at home too with placers. I'm seeing a lot of placers every week. There's a hero release, and it brings people back, which is, I'm sure, awesome for their numbers. But particularly, we're going to be talking about PvE maps today because both Battlefield and Blackheart's Bay re-entered, and my games were not healthy on such places. Now, of course, I'm not going to soapbox here and be like, everyone, those people, they're listening right now. Of course, probably they're not. But what can we do at home to help those maybe returning to these PvE maps to maybe understand them, or at least what do we need in a draft to make that work?
I think it's fair. Well, let's start with Battlefield so we can at least hone in on something first. So this is an extremely PvE-centric map around burning down the Immortals. Kyle, you and I don't think you were on that episode, Dunk, probably about a month ago now, talked about the highest single target DPS heroes for Battlefield of Eternity.
Yep, episode 170, if anyone's interested in that strategy.
Okay, so 8 weeks ago, never mind. It's been a while.
They took it out, and then they gave it back.
Right. Right, and apparently in that time, at least... it sounds like from your games, Kyle, people have had some issues reacclimating to Battlefield of Eternity. I had some really good Battlefield games this week, but
it's Diamond, right? So my confusion is weighted by my league.
That's fair enough. But Dunk, every time you're on, and anytime we get onto battleground specific discussion, you always have a beautiful, like almost as if you're prepared it. But I know it's just because you have such a great understanding of the game. Like, what are your simple tips about Battlefield for those kind of returning to it for the first time in a while?
Okay, so 3 things. 1, don't underestimate Defender's advantage in a fight on the Immortal. The addition of Garrosh is worth mentioning here. There's also Alarak, but there's just in general a lot of heroes where it is very scary to be underneath the enemy Immortal and fighting. And I feel like people don't respect that often enough. Far too often, even in my games, I see my team trying to race and the enemy team comes up and none of my team retreats. And then they just get blown up by Immortal stuns, Alarak combos onto them, whatever else. So don't take 5v5 fights under the enemy Immortal. Having said that, if you force your enemy to defend and you have one range hero who can poke the Immortal safely, that's like the ideal situation because they're not getting any value attacking your Immortal. And you'll see this a lot in competitive games where they'll be like 4-man defending their own Immortal, but there's like a range hero like a Li Ming or a Valla or a Lunara poking down the Immortal, and it goes from, one team being pretty even on the Immortal race to, well, we defended all this time, and now we're 4,000 HP behind in the Immortal. And then third, it's relatively important to have someone who can split soak and then join the fight. It's more prevalent in competitive, but it is still valuable. Even in Hero League, you're going to sometimes need to clear camps that are pushing because the Fallen Shaman camps are so powerful. You're going to sometimes need to soak experience to hit a talent timing, so you can actually move out from defending your Immortal to attacking theirs, and having a global like Dahaka, or someone who just wave clears extremely quickly, like a Leoric or a Ragnaros, to kind of one-shot a wave and rejoin you, that's very valuable.
Interesting. So to take a step back, and we're loading up into Battlefield of Eternity, what does the draft need? Like first pick, or just how could I add the most weight to my comp? Should I be the Lunara, Greymane, Li Ming in your case, or should I be part of the defense? If I'm the carry, you know, I'm on my way up. I'm good. Let's do this.
My personal favorite way to carry this map is to pick Alarak and combo people onto stun platforms and one-shot them. Alternatively, you can do a similar thing with Garrosh now.
I was about to say, I see why you
pull
mentioned
throw
Garrosh before.
Yeah, his pull throw is pretty dirty around Immortal. You can play Artanis if you're one of those players. Swap people onto stuns. That's personally, that's my favorite way to carry the map. But I do think also, as an early pick, just getting one of the great Immortal killers like Valla or Greymane is a very reasonable thing to do, and focusing on that.
So there's a lot of confused people out there, and they've made simple rules for themselves on what you do on the very first Immortal. Is it entirely comp dependent, or are any of those true? Defend first must be, you always have to attack first.
It's completely comp dependent. I would advise you, when you go into the load screen, to try and identify which team wins the race. First and foremost, like Alarak, terrible in the race, excellent on the map, because anytime you get into a 5v5 on your own Immortal, you will win that 5v5 pretty much. Whereas the opposite is kind of true of something like a Greymane. He doesn't contribute very much if you're having to 5v5 under their Immortal or something, or even under your Immortal. He doesn't add anything to that specifically, but he kills races. So identify which one you want to do, and then try and get your team to follow you into doing that.
The first Immortal pops. We've made our decision. We're of course great laid out, and we're only level early 3, maybe even 2, because we had some deaths. Does the specialist or your soaker, your Dahaka, stick it out to 4, or do they join the defense and then try to do that soaking later?
I think the best plan is to defend on the first half of the Immortal phase and let your soaker soak during that time, because on the first Immortal, the second half is always what I call aggressive positions, where your Immortal that you want to defend is on the enemy side of the map, and their Immortal that you want to attack is on your side of the map. That's what I refer to as aggressive positions on BoE, which is the most favorable for racing, essentially, and for damaging the Immortal, because the people who are damaging the Immortal are closest to their towers, their defensive structures, their healing wells. So you would much rather execute your defense of the Immortal, if you are forced into doing that, on the first phase of the first Immortal.
And every single time, without fail, on the first Immortal during the second phase, it'll be in those positions.
It's always aggressive positions on the first Immortal second phase, yes. Which is where you want to race usually. It's very difficult to defend in that position. It can be done, and sometimes it's the right call, but it's very tough. If you are going to end up defending in the second phase of the first Immortal, it's usually because you've drafted 4-1 style composition on BoE, which is where you have like a Greymane who's just going to go run and hit their Immortal, and then your whole team is going to Zerg your Immortal on aggressive side and just either kill them because you have that strong of a comp at fighting underneath your Immortal, or kind of zone them off, protect your Immortal, that sort of thing.
Stall tactics.
Yes.
All right.
Something worth noting that does happen sanely in my league. Immortal pops, someone goes and soaks the other lane. All good, pretty common. Everyone should be doing it, sending one person off, that Dahaka we talked about.
It depends on the positioning, where the enemy is, what's going on. I think it's not worth soaking unless you're close to a talent break point. If that makes sense, like if you're level 3, 6, or 9, it's probably worth soaking for the first half and trying to defend. If you are, level 8, enemy team's level 8, neither of you has any chance of getting to 10 by the time these Immortal ends, you probably are better off just going to help the Immortal, unless there's like a merc camp to clear. So like tier 1 priority is defending a fallen shaman camp, because it will just destroy everything in its path. Tier 2 is a talent breakpoint. Tier 3 is like the Khazra camp. You can pretty much ignore that one. And then after that, you shouldn't be really splitting.
I like that. I like that, you're basically giving your guys 8 instead of the 7 you currently are. Doesn't matter that much, so let's all push together. But we're already seeing in the chat right now, everyone believes that the first vehicles, Garden Terrors, Dragon Shire, or Immortals, Punishers as well, are all bad. And that you should be split pushing as hard as you can during those things.
I mean, everything is situational and composition dependent, and I would say that's almost always true. On Infernal Shrines, the first Punisher does almost nothing. I 100% agree. And it's risky if you have a weak team fight early game to go contest that closed space. Battlefield of Eternity is different because the map objective is kind of like progressive. The more damage you do to it, the less shield it has, unlike the Punishers, where if they win by 1, they still won 100-0. So yeah, getting, 1/10 of a level less XP because you miss one wave on 8 to 9, that's probably worth that loss if you deal an extra 4,000 damage to the Immortal yourself, It just depends.
Is there anything cute like on Infernal Shrines where you leave like a skull or Haunted Mines? If you're losing in that case, you leave a skull in the basement so they have to go get it and you can try to make your comeback for a little longer. I have never on Battlefield Eternity seen anyone say, stop, it has 2 health, don't hit it. We're going to wait to the 7-minute mark and then we'll activate our Immortal.
The only time you'll ever really see this is in the ultra late game where you have people dead. Like, let's say you get into a knockdown, drag-out brawl over the Immortals, right? And it's 5 kills to 4. You're the last one alive. Their Immortal has 1 HP. Do you auto-attack it? No. You wait until all of your team is alive, and then you pick it up. Okay, that's maybe too a far-fetched situation, but there's definitely a situation where, like, you're fighting and you lose 2 people, but their Immortal's at 1 HP, and they have all 5 people alive. They're going to do some form of like split defense, attack your Immortal, that sort of thing. You don't want to instantly cap the Immortal, even if you have the option, because if 2 of your people are still dead and the Immortal spawns and runs down the lane, you can't even walk up to it because the enemy team will just kill the 3 of you who are with it. So you probably don't want to pick it up. You want to wait for your revives so you're evenly matched,
That makes sense. And I've got to say, I feel completely spoiled getting to ask you such simple questions and getting such fantastic answers back. Garrett, do you have anything on Battlefield of Eternity?
On Eternity, no. Dunk, you've answered a lot of the questions I had. It's like all of your things where you said it depends on comp. It sounds like a lot of Battlefield of Eternity, it all goes back to the very first thing you said, which was on that load screen, figure out who wins the race. And then you know what to do. Especially when you were talking about is the adage of ignore the first Immortal, it's not important. Is that true? And it's like, well, if you win the race, why not just win the race? So if you understand that, then you know the decision to make.
Yeah.
I'm also giggling because I know Kyle had a terrible game with the Greymane and refused to do any Immortal damage this week. And so the entire time you're giving all this stuff like, yeah, the Greymane goes in and just starts. He's the one soloing it while you stall. I know Kyle was secretly behaving himself, but he was giggling inside.
And then now I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be that Greymane. And I was the Li Ming in the game, but Greymane had the priority on the Immortal because of his sustained damage over my incremented damage. So we gave it to him. I went a bit more of a ranged rather than magic missile build there to add to the team fights and the fence, and it fell apart because he didn't get the memo, and Sonya was tilted by the entire exchange in the first place. But this is calming. This is really good information to have. Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears and talk about Blackhearts for a bit, though. So in the past, Kyle, you and I have always chalked Blackhearts Bay up to 4 key points, which are merc camps, point control, double soak, and a coin bank. I'm not sure how important point control is anymore because fights in pickup games don't seem to last that long.
It's everything we talked about. All those cute Blackhearts Bay things are very much out the window right now. Perhaps because of dive and team fights are fun. I'm not sure. It's the one map where you can just choose not to ever team fight and win, which to me would be the most easy thing to do in the first place. Why would we engage in the chance of losing?
Yeah, well, chances are the humans on the other end that are trying to stop you from winning are going to make you fight around the turn-in.
Right. Normally you do try to fight because it's fun. And then you start to realize, well, we've got a Rexar and we've got a Murky, and maybe we'll just push. Maybe we'll just take camps. But let's give it the treatment. Let's give it the treatment. So Blackheart's Bay loads up. What are you thinking about? First thing on your mind if you're maybe looking to carry or have the greatest impact?
First two things are probably one, making sure that my team doesn't immediately lose the game if they 1-4 split top and bot, because the 1-4 split doesn't always happen, but it happens often enough to where if you have a comp that just doesn't have anyone who can double soak or just has a cripplingly bad 4-man, you will probably lose the game.
Perfect. Let's fix that. How do we stop that from happening? Hammers. Like an early pick hammer seem a really good way to make lower leagues do a 1-4.
Yeah, hammer team is way advantaged in the 1-4. Hammer medic is actually one of the best like 4v4 just push them lanes you can make, because it's so hard to trade into, and medic's so strong in the early game when people don't really have the tools to dive the backline effectively. Most 4v4s though can go relatively even. What I would consider a really bad 4v4 is like, let's say you end up in kind of like a kill comp where you're running like an Uther Genji style. You already are low on wave clear. You don't have very good lane sustain. You really want to rely on pickoffs. But then the enemy goes like Ariel, Tassadar, Valla, tank, and they just put 4 people in the bottom lane, and you can't hurt any of them. You can't clear the wave, and they're just killing all your buildings. That's the kind of disaster I'm talking about when I talk about the 4v4 disaster. On the top side of the map, double soak, there's a pretty wide variety of heroes nowadays who can actually do the double soaking effectively. Obviously, the quintessential one is Zul. Everyone knows that. But you'll almost never end up in a situation where you don't have someone who can at least handle the double soak.
Are there any straight kind of rock, paper, scissors counters to Zul? I see Nazeebo and Jaina's name thrown around.
I found Jaina is okay, not great.
But better if the Zul panics, for sure.
Yeah. If the Zul gives you the fight, like if he messes up and gives you the fight away from the wave, you'll definitely win. But if he plays correctly and just wave clears and runs away, you have a hard time dealing with the extra skeletons he spawns, pushing your towers. But it's a manageable matchup. I think Leoric is probably the best one against the Zul. You go the Royal Focus talent, and it allows you to wave clear like a champion. You can match the Zul. You can't die to ganks. Even if you do die to ganks, it doesn't matter.
How cute is that? How cute are we getting here? Is it Royal Focus with like Lingering Apparition? And
you don't need to get weird. You can go completely normal like Leoric build and just take Royal Focus, and it turns you from like an average laner to a double lane soaking monster. Because it changes the breakpoint from like 2 autos for each range backline minion to 1 auto, and it insta clears the wizard, which for Leoric, that's a difference of like 6 seconds clear time per wave because of the breakpoints. So it is really impactful, actually.
Can I take reanimation? Fealty unto Death's on the same level. That would be really neat.
I love that you're now just asking for specific tips on one of your favorite
picks. I know, I'm
picks
sorry. I love Leoric so much.
Yeah, you can definitely take reanimation. If you specifically know you're going to be doing that, you could do that. But I think hopelessness and block are too good to give up for Leo.
Fair enough.
You could take Mana Thirst at 1. I'm not sure if any of the pros have done that in their Royal Focus builds. I don't remember.
Yeah, get mana back on your swing so you can keep going, perhaps.
If I remember correctly, like the mana breakpoints, because of the double globes, is pretty favorable for you, and you really don't run out of mana. So you don't need the talent is the thing. But I definitely think Royal Focus Leo is like one of the best choices for the top lane. You'll struggle a little until 4, but generally that doesn't last very long on this map, and it should be good.
Would you take him even like regardless if there's a Zul or not, just because of his wave clear?
Yeah, I think you can early pick the Leoric and just plan to just tell your team you're the double soaker if it ends up being like that. And if you don't end up in a composition where you want to initiate the double soak, you can even be the solo laner on the bottom lane, since you're pretty good at that as well. And Leoric's not bad at clearing the small skeleton camps or whatever. He's safe if you want to ninja an enemy camp. He's really safe if you're on your own side of the map. So overall, I do like Leoric a lot on this map.
Good against Sonya, too, who you're going to be fighting probably on Blackheart's Bay. All those camps.
Yeah.
So what if you're not going 4-1 or trying to combat 4-1?
If it doesn't look like either team is very committed to the 4-1, then it becomes really important to have globals or an overwhelming advantage in mercenary speed. So global like Falstad, where normally I don't really consider Falstad that viable. On Blackheart's Bay, for example, he's fantastic. You can clear the small coin camps. Every time they're off cooldown, you can global to your teams to help them. The nature of Blackheart's Bay, if you're not in the 1-4, then it just tends to be there's a lot of skirmishes going on in the lanes, but the enemy team has always got some person in the jungle. You've always got some person in the jungle. Well, if it's your Falstad in the jungle, he can rejoin the team much faster than the enemy's mercenary clearing camp hero, and then you can get an advantage. And turning a 3v3 into a 4v3 is way more advantageous than like a typical global where you turn a 4v4 into a 5v4.
Who do you think are the big wrongful seducers of merc camps? Like, Malthael can do it. Samudo. Like, everyone kind of has their version of Blackheart's Bay that they take merc camps with. Who are the top tier, and who are the ones that we've been wrongfully drafting?
Top tier are probably realistically Illidan, as much as I hate to admit it. Sonya is excellent. Rhaegar is fantastic. But be careful, if he's your solo healer, you can get in awkward situations where all your lanes start losing because your Rhaegar is doing mercenaries. But if you are running double healer, Rhaegar is excellent as you like. The fact that Rhaegar can be not only the secondary healer in your compositions, but also the mercenary guy on this map adds extreme value to him, in my opinion. And he's like criminally underdrafted, probably at every level below GM on this map. As far as things that are probably overvalued, I'm not really sure. I don't think you need to get wild with something like a Samuro to clear camps or, do crazy specialist stuff like Murky. I don't feel like the map really needs that. You just want general kind of fast camp clearers, not crazy PvE stuff.
So Sonya, just because of her raw power, but we mentioned Falstad and Illidan, and I'm assuming that Illidan is a hunt Illidan, so he can do a similar thing.
Yeah, probably the global is the best. If they have like a really tough team to team fight into or whatever, maybe you go meta. I don't know. I think hunt right now is just kind of the better one. Meta to me feels not impactful enough compared to the addition of a global.
I think too we have trouble keeping a support with a meta Illidan at the moment. It's a little too dangerous in there.
Yeah.
And it lasts too long, honestly. Every time I see a meta, he just kites his own team away.
Yeah, maybe.
So one of the main situations that comes up in Blackheart's Bay across all leagues is the first coins go up and your team gets nothing. And somebody wants to guard the turn-in, but there's no one there. Like, how should you manage control of the turn-in? Is it worth something as maybe Moldy and Alpha is running a Zagara or some sort of site control?
I think site control is extremely valuable. It can be worth it to guard the turn-in as long as you're soaking all the lanes, is the thing. So let's say you get 10-0'd in the coin chests. It's a disaster. It is completely reasonable to have one person committed to guarding the coin chest. The problem is you're going to end up being behind in tempo if the enemy elects not to try to turn in. So if the enemy takes that opportunity and has the coin advantage and then they start collecting all the mercs on the map, well, at some point you're going to have to give up defending that turn in order to defend the mercs. So I think it's best if you have a vision tool to do it. It can be okay if you suspect that the enemy team is going there for some reason, if they've given you some indication based on the way they walked out of vision or just by what merc camps are available or something, how many people are missing off the map. like let's say suddenly 4 people disappear off the map right after they get 10 coins, you can be pretty sure they're going to the turn and they're not taking 4 people to go clear mercs. So in that situation, definitely tell your team to go defend. But you just can't afford to have someone sitting there watching the whole time if you don't know that they're coming to turn in and if it's going to put you behind in mercenary camps potentially.
Fair enough. What do you say of the boss here? And in particular, I see a lot of people who are very seduced by soloing it. Rexars, Sonya's, Fury Varians.
You're seeing Fury Variants? I want to be in your games.
Huh?
I said I want to be in Kyle's games with Rexars and Fury Variants.
Do you, man?
I don't want to be anywhere near Fury Variants. I'm personally not a very big fan of like boss solo strategies ever. I mean, maybe this map is one of the better ones for it because the one boss a lot of people tend to forget about, and it's kind of off to the top, and there's even a watchtower to defend you. So I could see an argument that it's the best map to have the boss on, but to me, the boss is there as a sort of last chance to win the game for a team who is very far behind structurally and coins. So, like, let's say you're playing a Blackheart's game. It's been a tough game. You've only gotten, like, 1 turn in, but you had the wall down in mid already, so you got the wall top as well. It's now the late game. They've gotten 4 turn-ins. Your mid keep is down. They have, like, 12 coins on them. They're waiting for their 18 coin turn-in or something, but it's 16 to 18. So, in theory, you could fight, but you know they're not going to come to the turn-in. You have no coins. They're just going to wait for 20. You're going to lose the game. To me, the boss is there as a sort of, this is something we can do as the losing team that the enemy team has to respond to, or they risk losing the game. So in that situation, the 16 team has no coins. They go to boss. Enemy team has to either come and fight them on the boss on the same talent tier, or risk defending against a boss on their keep, where if they lose the fight, they lose the game.
So if you're winning on Blackheart's Bay and feeling great and you're waiting for that 20, just don't even bother with a boss, though it might feel cool.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, the boss is one of the only ways you can lose the game, realistically. So try to avoid that.
Fair enough. It also, yeah, and the chat's bringing up, too, that it is the least impactful. And that's funny, maybe because the turn-in's so far away, where as like Cursed Hollow, you take the boss, now you cover your turn-in pretty easily. It's right there. And you almost do both at the same time.
Yeah. In my experience on Blackheart's Bay, if the teams correctly identify, like if you correctly identify that the enemy team is going to boss, it's much better for you actually to just push bottom than to go try to walk across the map to the top side and contest the boss. Timing-wise, it's very difficult to make it there in time, but the result of that is also that it's very difficult for the enemy team to make it down to bottom lane in time to defend against your push. And I can't even tell you the number of times I see a team who like is getting a siege giant camp. They get the siege giant camp, and then it's like, oh, weird, the enemy team's all off the map. Oh, they're probably doing boss. Okay, so we're going to run across bottom, take their siege giant camp too, and get the keep. They finish boss, they have to hearth, we get out, and now we get to defend the boss for free, and we're up a keep because of it. So that's why like the boss is kind of a risky call, and why I only really resort to it as a last-ditch effort if I don't think I have another win condition.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess you're right, because on Cursed Hollow, the siege giant, you have to steal their side to get in your boss lane. Huh. Well, the value makes sense then.
Well, it's another one of those scenarios where it's smarter to just go and get more value than waste time moving across the map, which is something that Kyle, you and I talk about all the time. Except a lot of on this, I feel like you and I, it comes up all the time of, hey, they're pushing top, we're bottom. Let's not go defend. Let's just push bottom as well. But now we're talking about doing it in the case of a boss is pushing across the map.
Well, and I find everything easier if you think about Heroes, not as a real-time strategy game, but as a card game. You know, you're doing a draft, Magic the Gathering here, or Hearthstone's the same way. When you play a card, what is the impact it did? Or did you actually just sort of dance around for some sweet combo later on?
I think you're absolutely right, dude. If there was it'd be hilarious if there was a way to heal your core in Towers of Doom. I'm sure people would do it, and I'd be laughing, be like, the only shot that matters is that last shot. Stop worrying about healing. So,
Reverse pumpkin sappers, heal your core.
yeah, they're green and they shoot little. That's where the healing icons from Stukov are going. They rip them out because they're going to be they're going to be updating a healing pumpkin into Towers of Doom. That would be so awful. Well, as usual, Dunk. I'm so thankful when you're on the show. When there's a battleground update, or a rotation update. I hope there are fewer rotation updates in the future, but hopefully we can keep lining it up because I love hearing your kind of cut and dry, relatively simple rules for playing on battlegrounds. So. Anyway, I think this is as good a place as any to start wrapping this episode up. We are already past our 90 minutes, so I think we'll push some emails to next week. I would like to remind our listeners out there, however, if you would like to write into the podcast, itncast@gmail.com is the place to do so. Thank you again to our patrons over patreon.com/ITN. Big thanks to our Patreon producers, Declan H, Cheesy Bob, and Mythdoll. You guys are very generous badasses, and we appreciate it. We have Into the Nexus t-shirts available at shirts.amove.tv. We're typically live Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern right here on twitch.tv/amovetv. You can follow the show on Twitter at ITNcast. And we got to thank Gorath from The Core Show for our sick intro music and BrianGriffithMusic.com for our outro music. DunkTrain as our guest this week. You're up first. Where can folks find you around the web?
Folks can find me on Twitter at DunkTrain or twitch.tv/DunkTrain, where you can follow me to see when I go live. I play almost entirely Hero League, sometimes with guests on comms, occasionally maybe some Team League with other streamers, stuff like that. And this weekend I'm actually planning to do some Eastern Clash VOD review. So if you're interested in hearing maybe my insights or even just riffs on the players in the Eastern Clash, go ahead and check it out.
Okay, cool.
It's such candid information, and you're a brave man, and I love hearing it.
I think it's really good, especially if folks want to hear a deeper take on some of the things you touched on today with the Western Clash.
Yeah,
and
it'll be
also,
really interesting to see if it's the same.
People will find you at Gamescom, right, this year?
Oh, yeah. I guess this is the first thing I've really done since that was announced, but it was announced this morning, that I will be at Gamescom. I'm going to be doing some live vlogging type stuff, recording some Heroes content, probably with some other streamers who are going to be there, like Jake, March, from the Heroes community, and it should be great. So if you're at Gamescom and you're listening to this, absolutely come say hello. I love to meet fans. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm super excited to visit Germany.
Oh, that's fantastic.
In particular, with the hints that are being dropped as to the hero that's going to be revealed there.
Yeah, I hope it's Kel'Thuzad.
That's the word.
I mean, like, it's Knights of the Frozen Throne and Hearthstone. I love Kel'Thuzad. I've loved him forever. I love mages. Like, I want...
Except for he releases into a no mage meta.
Hey, man. I'll make it work.
Make it work?
I'll make it work.
I am unable to live in a world where I have to specify what KT I'm speaking of. So that's the only thing. No, I'm jazzed. Why the hell don't we have an actual lich in this game yet?
Yeah.
No. Bring it on. I'm Kyle, you've been screaming Kel'Thuzad, I'm pretty sure, since Into the Nexus episode 1. So actually, no, before that, I think on StarCast, when we were talking StarCraft and Blizzard Dota was announced, I think you were yelling Kel'Thuzad.
He's a lich. He's awesome. He rezzed in a fountain that desecrated a whole city. Like, he's amazing. And like, I've been hearing a lot of people complaining about Garrosh and his kit, and what happened to Grom Hellscream, and why didn't we get him instead? And I'm thinking, does no one remember that he had a Blade Master's kit in Warcraft 3? He's Samuro. That would be Garrosh. But if that's the case, Kel'Thuzad's been done for 10 plus years. There is no other way. I'm going to be so upset if it's not Dark Ritual eating minions, if it's not Frost Nova, if there's not Death and Decay as pure percent-based damage.
Well, get ready to be disappointed, Kyle, because they've been switching things up a lot.
I know.
Manage your expectations. That's really specific. Really specific thing to look forward to, but whatever the case is. Oh, come on. Nothing can fall flatter than Probius did for me. Nothing. I'm sure you'll like KT, the other KT, Kyle. It's already
true
starting.
KT.
Yep. All right. Well, Kyle, where can folks find you when you're not being pre-disappointed about a hero you've always wanted to be added to the game?
You can find me on my own Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Kyle Fergusson. This week is the return of the full Team League team. Thank you, Jeff, for stepping in and filling in this past weekend. But we have Scott Johnson back, the full core crew, with Kristen Ashton. Look forward to that Saturday.
Awesome. One of these Saturdays, I really want to get back in there. Folks, you can follow me on Twitter at GarrettArt, where at the moment, all I'm doing is crying about not cracking a Lich King in 220 Hearthstone packs. That might end eventually, but not anytime soon. Every other podcast I do can be found over at amove.tv. I would recommend going and subscribing to Embrace the Spoilers, where I am currently spoiling the new season of Game of Thrones with Jocelyn Moffat. Then we'll do a few movies, and then we'll get into the Indiana Jones trilogy, which I've seen a million times, and Jocelyn has never seen. So that should be a good time. I love Dunk's face right now. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, good luck and have fun.
Take care.